how do you put a list of objects on a WPF form dynamically so that if you add or remove an entry, the controls for it are added or removed? Well, in this installment of the WPF Controls mini-series, we're going to look at one possible solution, which is to use the items control. This is one of those controls that is actually rather easy to use, but is at the same time also confusing to a lot of people. So let's clear up that confusion. But first, if you're new to my channel, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. This channel is full of videos explaining the various parts of C#. I also have a website where I provide full courses on C# and SQL. In fact, I have a start-to-finish course that includes an add-on where I replace the user interface with a WPF user interface. Now, if that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the description to get the main course and the WPF add-on course for a total of $97. That's a $7 discount off the normal price. Now, if you want an extra $15 off, look at the second link, which adds the ASP.NET MVC add-on as well. So if you buy all three together, you get a total of $22 off the bundle. So that's over 40 hours of real-world instruction for less than $3 an hour. Okay, so let's get started in our example project. Now in this series, I'm using the same starter application to make things easier. So if you watch the previous video in the series, this is the same place we're starting in this video. So let's just take a brief overview look at what we have here. We have a WPF user interface that has the basics of a MVVM shell setup, and it uses Caliburn Micro. And then we have our demo library, which simulates the idea of data access using this data access class, which just creates a whole bunch of random addresses and random people and wires all that up in this class. We're not really touching this class. We're not worrying about data access. We're not worrying about any of that stuff. We're just worrying about user interface in this video. So we'll get rid of that. So the user interface this is the back end where we have a list, a bindable collection list of people. And in the constructor, we're saying give us a new set of people. So at this point, at the very start, we have a form that's got data behind it, and we have the data simulated, so it's all ready to just display something. And that's what we're planning on doing now. So here is the front end, which is plain. I mean, there's nothing to it really yet. And we're going to add something very simple. We're not going to go overboard trying to create a beautiful UI. We're just going to try and demonstrate how to use the items control. All right, so we have a grid with just rows, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows on it. We'll probably only use a couple in this video. So to start off, let's create our items control. So right down here, and let's actually expand this out. So I'll switch over to XAML only. We're going to have in here an items control. Now it is plural items, not just one, so items. And we're going to say items source. This is where the data comes from. So you have to do a binding here to people. All right, so there's our binding to people. And we'll say grid.row equals 1. So what this does is it binds our items control to this people bindable collection. Now the cool thing is, this is how you do it if you have something else named people, or if you don't want to name this items control people. But if you can name this the same thing as your list, like you don't have two different things that are going to be lists from that same people list, then you can just say x:name equals people. And that's the equivalent. So it's either one, it's up to you based upon can you name this people, and it doesn't make sense to name it people. But this people matches up then with our people back here, which is our shell view model, and it's binding to that property. So it binds to people, and we'll watch for updates as well because it's a bindable collection. Okay, that's what this right here does for us, is it allows us to not have to say there's been an update whenever any item inside changes. So if you use a list here instead, that wouldn't tell the front end, hey, something new has been something been changed in one of those people. Okay, so we have this list. We have it bound. We put it on row 0. Sorry, row 0. That puts it on this row right there. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to actually have something in here. So an ItemsControl, essentially what it is it's going to be a repeating set. So if you have a list of string, let's say, then you would just have, essentially create a stack panel with each name one at a time and create those individually. But in our case, we have a set of objects which have multiple things inside them. So we'll create one row layout, essentially. Think of it kind of like a table, but it's not. So we'll create one row layout, and then it will repeat that row layout for every person in the people list. So let's demonstrate this. So we say ItemsControl dot ItemsPanel. I'm sorry, ItemsTemplate. ItemsTemplate, right? Singular, ItemsTemplate. ItemsPanel comes next, but we'll get to that in a minute. So an ItemsTemplate, this is the template that it's going to use for every single, let's call it row, in our set. So now we say, well, this is a data template. And now in here, whatever we specify in here is what will get created for every row in our list. So let's do something really simple for now. Let's look at, real quick, I'm going to look at the people list. The person model has, let's grab the full name and think anything else. The account balance. That'll work. Full name and account balance. So, text block. All right, now I'm going to bind this since it's going to have multiple. So I really don't want to name it something that would then be bound that way. I'd rather do a binding on this with the property I want to bind to. Text equals, we'll do a binding to full name. That's the full name of the person. And that's all we'll do for that. But then we also want something else. And so I'm going to have to do two things in here. I want also this, and I'll show you for now. The text block, text equals, and we'll do a binding. And it's account balance. The problem is I can't have two things, just like anywhere else in WPF, I can't have two things that aren't in some sort of list or grid or something like that. This is the data template is expecting one thing. So I'm going to highlight both of those and Control X for a minute. And I'm going to say I want let's do a stack panel, and we'll do the orientation to vertical. And we'll leave it like that for now. No big, deal here, just a quick little stack panel. So now we have a stack panel inside our data template. And so for every person in the people list, we're going to create a stack panel that's orientation is vertical, that has a text block for full name and another text block for account balance. And that's really it. So now what we'll do is we'll save this. And now we'll run it just to see what it looks like. And there we go. So now we have Miguel with his account balance, Robert with his account balance, and so on down the list. Now notice there's no scroll bar here. We haven't implemented that. But it just lists them down. And of course, it's ugly right now. but it does show us something. And it shows us our set or our design, this design right here, the stack panel, for each person. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people. So there's a design. And that's really the foundation of the items control. Once you set up this structure right here, then inside the data template, whatever WPF goodness you want to do is up to you, and it doesn't have anything to do with the items control, really. It's just saying, okay, whatever you have in here, I'll render that for every person in the list. Now, notice I said full name and account balance. Well, those aren't actually properties right on the root of our view model. They're inside people. But because we're doing essentially a for each on this people, then it says, okay, this is Caliburn micro wiring things up. It says, okay, I know you have a person. So I'm actually going to look at the person model and look at these properties for everything inside the data template. Therefore, full name and account balance are on the person model, and we're all good. So that's a little bit of magic happening behind the scenes. And now, really, the sky's the limit. Because you know how to do binding. You know how to do simple controls like text block and checkbox and those kind of things. So now you just format this, make it look pretty, however you want, and you're good to go to use the items control. Now, we're not done yet. I did want to point out one other thing. Well, a few other things, but this one was kind of important. Notice how it just kind of stacks these right on top of each other. Now, each of these, like Robert Lee and 79.21, that's Robert's record, and so that's one stack panel. We've also created our own stack panel here with the orientation of vertical. However, the overall orientation is the same. It's also a stack panel by default, and the orientation is vertical. That's why we have this right here, where it just kind of scrolls down the page. If you didn't want that, then what you could do is create something else. Before we do that, though, I want to do a little bit of setup first. It's a little bit clearer so you can see visually how these things are laid out. So I'm going to cut this temporarily and add a border in first. Now, a border is something we can set a background to. You can do some pretty fancy things, but we're going to do really simple. We're going to say that the border brush is black. The border thickness is 1. Then we'll set a margin and padding. Just a simple 10 and 10 for the padding as well. And then in here, we'll paste back our things. Without changing anything else, we're going to run this and just see now there's our set. Okay, so notice actually the whole row is highlighted because the row only has it's only one column. Okay, but there's our set of people. And we have to kind of scroll off the page almost to get all 10 in. Now, let's look at changing that stack panel orientation of vertical to something different. And this is where we have the ItemsControl.ItemsPanel. Then in here, we have an ItemsPanelTemplate. Now, it's a little bit different than down here with the item template. This is saying the items panel, which is this whole thing in here, here's a template for it. So right now the template is that it is the stack panel orientation of vertical. What if you want to change that? Let's just do horizontal first. So you'd say stack panel orientation equals horizontal. And that's it. And this is just a definition of how you're going to lay out these groups here, these sets of controls. So let's run this. And there you go. Now I scroll off the page to the right instead of going straight down. But what if you want to do something different entirely? Well, how about a wrap panel? A wrap panel, what it does when it scrolls to the right, but when it hits the edge of the border of our form, it goes down, puts it at the left-hand side on the next, kind of row down. And there we go. So now if we move our control, notice how they kind of fill in or space out as our form changes. Also notice they're not the same width. Now if we wanted to, we could have set the width of each of our items, but I didn't want to do that. So now we have one that's long, Robert Hernandez. We have one that's small, like Frank Lee. And so Frank Lee takes up less space. Therefore, we can put more items in this row, row 2, than we can row 1. So there you go. So now you can manipulate how the layout works for the items control as far as how the items relate to each other. Now note, this is still on one row in our form. It's just that within that row, we've used the whole row to place 10 different items. And if the form's wide enough, it's just one row. If a form's small enough, it actually stacks it pretty high, and so that row is quite high. All right? Pretty simple stuff, I know, but at the same time, really powerful when it comes to deciding how you want to lay things out. This is also really good for responsiveness. Imagine if each of these has a little edit box where you can edit the account balance. Well, now you can put as many as will fit onto a screen instead of having that awkward scroll or one long list like this. Now it kind of can fill in where you need it to. So there's a lot of flexibility here. There's a lot of power in the items control in general. But we're not done yet. So what we haven't seen is what happens when we add a new item. So let's do that. Now over here in our shell view model, we don't have anything yet for a button, but we're going to create something. And what we'll do is we will create a button that just adds a person. We'll create another button that removes a person from a list. And we'll do it a random add or remove. Okay, so let's wire that up. So first, we'll create a public void add person. There we go. So now this method, what it's going to do is when you click the button, that's the add person button, it's going to add a new person to our people list. Well, how do we do that? Well, if we have this data access over here, we notice we have a method called getPeople, where we pass in the total number of people, and it returns a list of person model. So what I'll do is I'll call this and just ask for one person. Now I could make this public, the get person, when it returns just the one, but I don't really like that idea because, the problem is the ID right here. And I kind of want to have a unique ID. I want to do this right. So you know what? I am going to make that public. That way I can specify the ID instead of this one where it specifies the ID for me based upon the new list it's creating. So what I'll do is I'll come back over here. It's the get person method. And I'm going to call the data access. Let's just call it, I'll call it data access equals new data access. And now I have my list of people first of all. So let's get an int max ID equals people dot max, and we'll say x equals greater than x dot, and we'll get the ID number of the person ID. Let's get a max person ID dot oops, there we go. Sorry. So there we go. We've got the people list, and we're saying, give me the max person ID in this list. That's going to be a maximum identity number or value for the users. So if we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through 10, then it'll return 10 because it's the highest one in our list. So now I can say data access dot get person max ID +1. And that will be our new person to add. So we'll actually cut that out for a minute and we'll say people.add and then paste it back in. And there we go. It's in one line now instead of two. I didn't assign it to a variable first. But it will add a new person to our list at the end that has a maximum ID of, or an ID of 1 beyond the current max. Now let's go ahead and actually put this into use and test it out. I like to write as little code as possible before I test it. So let's go over to our view model. We have this whole thing right here. Let's collapse it for a minute. The items control is on row 0. So let's actually change that to row 1. So I can have my button above it. Let's actually create a stack panel orientation of horizontal. Let's put that on grid.row 0. And I'll just have one button for now, but I'll add a second one later. Button, the name is going to be add person. Oops, let's actually give it some text. There we go. So you have an add person. Let's just verify add person. So it should be that when we click this button, it adds a new person to our list. So we have 10 people here. Add a new person. Notice Daniel Davis just popped up. Then John Smith, and so on. So the add person button works. And it also updates that items control. So now let's add a delete button. So let's actually add it right now. I'll copy and paste this. And we'll call it remove person. Let's say remove random person. And the reason why it's a random person, not a specific person, doing it on each entry in that list and have a button on each and just hit delete, is because we're using an items control. And items control is more about display. It's not really about removing and adding rows necessarily. You can, but it's not the right tool if that's one of your primary focuses. And so one of the things it does not have is the ability to say, this is the selected row. And so therefore, you wouldn't know which one of those buttons was clicked unless you somehow kind of kludged it together to tell you. And so that's kind of a problem if you want to go down that road. But what I'm saying is, if you decide that's what you want, just tweak the control. There's other controls that can do this, including the data grid, which we're going to be covering in a future, coming out shortly, future video in this mini series. So we're going to remove a random person. So let's go over to and it's remove person as our method name. Let's come here and we'll create a new method. Remove person. There we go. And now what we need to do is find one of these people and remove them from the list. Now, to do a random item, I could just do the first item, but that doesn't seem like it's a lot of fun. So let's do a random item. Now, over in the data access class, there's actually another method that I'll probably make public. And that's this one right here, get random item. Now, this looks funky, but what it does is it's a generic method, so it takes any kind of item in and says, okay, take that array item and give me a random item out of that list. So let's make this public. And if you don't understand that, that's okay. watch the video on generics. It'll help, but this is a somewhat specialized little method. We could spend probably about 10 minutes talking through. So now, back over here, we can pass in, let's create our data access initialization. Copy and paste that. And we have the people list. So let's say person model. Let's call it person. Let's call it random person equals, and we'll say data access dot get random item of type person model, and we'll pass in our people list. I believe it needs an array though. So to array. There we go. So what it's going to do is going to take in the people list. It's going to convert it to an array first. And it's going to, actually I don't have to specify it now that I've got it passed in. It's going to take that array of people. It's going to get a random item out of that list and return it into this placeholder right here, this variable. And now what I can do is say people.remove random person. Now you might say, well, how does it know which one to remove? Well, remember that as we pass objects around, we're not passing all that data. Remember, it's the house model. And you've probably heard me say this before. When you instantiate an object, meaning you create an instance of it, what you're doing is you're taking the blueprint and creating a house. And what the variable holds is it holds essentially the address of that house. So if you pass that address around, you're not making a copy of the actual house, just a copy of the address. Everybody points to the same address. So therefore I say remove 123 Sesame Street. It goes in the list and says, do I have 123 Sesame Street? And if we do, it removes it. So with that being done, those 3 lines of code, we can now remove a random person. Notice John Lee is at the end. John Lee is still at the end, but somebody else is missing. Now if I go low enough, I've got Miguel, Bob, and Carlton. And Bob is gone now. Goodbye, Bob. Okay, so there we go. Now we have the ability to add and remove people, and notice this list works just fine. And it throws an error because I don't have anything on the list. That's a little bug we need to fix in our code here. So, in fact, I want to be, complete. So if people.length, count, array's length, count is greater than 0 or equals 0, then return. Just don't do anything. Okay? So that way it's gonna not do anything if we remove everybody and there's nobody left. So notice, you hear my clicking, nothing's happening. But if we add a person, the sequence creates or contains no elements, we've got another problem. So in that case, we need to kind of separate the declaration out here from the max ID. So therefore, let's go ahead and cut that out and say max ID equals, and we'll say declaration up here, we're gonna start at 0, but then I'll wrap this whole line here in an if statement. So they snippet, there we go. They used to have it right on this menu, and the menu got too long. It's still too long, but they put it under snippet. So surround with if. So if the people.count is greater than 0. So if there's more than 0 people in the list, then look for the max person. But if it's not, do nothing because max ID is 0. 0 plus 1 means the first person gets the ID of 1. So just to kind of prove that yes, we've worked out a couple of the obvious bugs. And that's one of the things you should do every time you create an application is check for the obvious bugs first before you look for obscure ones. Just make sure that your arrays and everything deal with the idea of going to 0 and not below and going, up from there and all the rest. So that's it. So that's the items control. So in the items control, we have the ability to create a template. Let's go ahead and close this out. You have the ability to create a template that lays out what do you do per object or per item in your list. In this case, we create a border around the whole thing, then create a stack panel and had 2 different text blocks. You could have text boxes. In fact, let's just do that real quick just to show you can. I don't want to feel like you didn't see something. So now we can actually modify the values in here for our account balances. We can have checkboxes, we can have buttons, we can have a whole bunch of things. But in general, it's more for display than it is for edit. And that's pretty much what the items control does. It's more display than it is edit, but you can do some edit. And in fact, if we went over the person model and I were to create an event in here where we did something to the user, maybe updated there is a live status or changed the date of birth, something like that, a method in here, I could call that inside the items control. So there's definitely things you can do in here on a per row basis if you'd like. But in general, I see this more as a display, but you can use it for other purposes as well. So it's up to you. It's up to your imagination how you want to use this, but it really does offer you a lot of options just in the data template. Now, if you don't like the layout, you can come up here and create this items panel template and say, okay, I want a wrap panel, or I want the stack panel to be horizontal, or I think there's some other options in there as well, maybe a grid or something like that. So those are your options for how to use the items control. But it really just creates a template or a layout for you that then you can go in there and be as creative as you want. You can have backgrounds, you can have images, you can have gradients and all the rest of stuff that you want inside this data template and make things look really amazing. Much better than what I put on the screen today. Okay? If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. I love to answer them if I can. I try and get to every comment that I can. All right. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. The downloads for this video, both the starter code and the end code, are in the description below, as well as my link to Patreon, my link to join my mailing list. And from there, you can get to contacting me directly if you have a question that's not really a YouTube question, but maybe a question that you want to ask of me in general. Okay? Thanks so much. And as always, I am Tim Corey.